Okay, so our checklist is very similar to graphing equations. Okay, the first three are identical. Okay, so your first step is to identify your M and your B. So we're identifying what our slope is and what our y-intercept is. Your second step is to plot your B, your y-intercept. Remember, we find that on the y-axis. That is our first point. Go ahead and plot that on your graph first. Your next step, step 3, is to use slope for rise over run. So whatever you have identified in the inequality as your slope, that's how you move your point, right? Think of it as kind of like sliding your point. So your intercept is where you start. Slope is how you move based on the fraction that you have. Remember, rise can either go up or down, and run, we always try to go to the right. Okay, remember, you repeat that and your line gets longer and more straight. It helps you connect connect and draw a better line. Sorry. Okay, so step 4, now is where it starts changing, right? Now we're going to draw a line, but this time, remember, it depends on what inequality symbol we have. Right, so if it does not have a line underneath for the or equal to, it's a dotted line. If it has a line underneath, that's where we still connect with a solid line. Okay, step 5 is to pick a point and plug it into our inequality. My go-to point is 0, 0. Only because it's easy for me to locate 0, 0 on a graph. Okay, the only other time that I would not pick 0, 0 and maybe pick 1, 1 is when my line is going directly through my origin, directly through 0, 0. Okay, once we plug it in and simplify, we're going to shade by checking our statement. Okay, so if we're left with a true statement, we're going to shade on top of 0, 0, or whatever point we pick, right? We shade on top of that point. If it's a false statement, we're going to shade on the other side. So you do not shade on top of the point that you picked. So I went ahead and I drew my graph already. I put 5 marks on each side to each direction. Okay, the inequality that we're graphing is y less than or equal to 2x plus 1. So if we're following our checklist, we are going to identify our slope and our intercept. I do that by circling my slope, putting a box on my intercept. Okay, remember, if our slope does not have a run, we give it a 1. So my rise is 2, my run is 1. Okay, our step 2 of our checklist is to plot the B. So I'm going to go ahead and plot my 1 on the y-axis. That's my y-intercept. My slope tells me to rise 2, run 1 because it's positive. So I'm going to rise 2 times, run 1 time to the right. And I'm going to repeat it so I can get a straighter line. So I rise 2, run 1, rise 2, run 1, rise 2, run 1, and we can continue, right? So based off of this symbol, I know that I'm going to have a solid line. Okay, so when I connect my points, I try to connect it through my whole graph, and I'm using a solid line because this one did have a line underneath. Okay, the point, remember, that I like using is 0, 0 only because it's easy to locate. So we're going to take 0, 0 and we're going to plug it into our inequality. Okay, so if I labeled x and y, that is where I'm going to plug them into my inequality. So instead of y, I'm going to say 0 less than or equal to 2 Instead of x, I'm going to say 0 plus 1. So if I simplify that, on the left-hand side of that symbol, I get a 0 less than or equal to. This right here simplifies to be 0. Don't forget to add the 1. So now I'm left with a statement that I've got to determine whether it is true or false. Okay, so then we ask ourselves, is 0 less than 1? I can tell yes that it is true, right? Because it's a true statement, we shade on top of where 0, 0 is located. So we shade everything in this direction on the side that 0, 0 is located. Okay, we shade it on top of it. Make sure to also check the statement 0 less than or equal to 1, right? So if one or the other is true, then we still shade on top of the point that we checked. Okay? So now if you go back to your pear deck, okay, go to slide 9. That is where you will be completing graphing the inequalities. Okay, following our checklist, I'll help you through one of them. So if we're identifying our m and our b, right, we look for the variable. The number that's with the variable is my slope. It's already a fraction, so I know I have a rise and a run. The other number, including the sign, right, including the operation, is my intercept or my b, right? So I'm going to start there when I plot. So on my y-axis, I'm going to start at -3. There's my first point. My next step is to use rise over run, so use my slope. It's positive, so I'm going to count up 1, to the right 3 times, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to repeat it so that I get a better line. Up 1, run 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do one more time. Up 1, run 1, 2, 3, and there's another point. Okay, I'm going to use the line feature to connect them. Okay, remember we want to try to go through my whole picture. Once I connect them, I'm going to look at my symbol. This one is a greater than symbol. It does not have a line underneath. So I'm going to pick the eraser and I'm going to kind of erase a few spots so that way my line looks dotted or dashed, right? Okay, so now I need to determine where it is shaded, right? Remember, I like to use 0, 0 because it's easy to locate, right? So I know if I get a true statement, I shade on top of where 0, 0 is. If I get a false statement, I'm going to shade on the other side of where that point is, right? So if I plug in 0, 0, I'm going to plug in a 0 for y greater than 1/3. I'm going to plug in a 0 for x minus 3. Okay, remember this simplifies just to be 0. So I'm left with 0 greater than -3. 0 is greater than -3, right? So that is a true statement. I'm going to take my highlighter, it doesn't matter what color you pick, and I'm going to shade on top, right? I'm going to shade, you can even change the size. I'm going to shade on top of my point and everything on this side of my line that I had initially drew. Okay, so you're responsible for completing the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides. Okay, when you get to the next slide, you'll be able to click on it and complete a 5-question quiz on graphing equations. Okay, so when you get to the last slide, slide 15, you will be able to click on that link. It will take you directly to your sign in, the name of the quiz that you're taking is Ike Algebra Unit 3 Quiz 1. There are 5 questions related to graphing equations.